Hey, sports fans, it's Larry Eater. This is Athletics Chat 17. We're doing it on September 2nd because our dear friend Stuart Weir is going on a staycation next week. And we did not want to miss a week of our lovely chats. And as you know, here's the rule. Stuart is in Oxford, England, the intellectual capital of the world. And I'm in San Jose, California. It's home to many things, to some of the finest falafels, to really good Korean food, and to this thing called the Silicon Valley. I'm sitting in the backyard of my parents, a lovely little yard, and I've got hummingbirds dancing around in the yard, and Stuart's in his, I think it looks like his work studio. Hello, Stuart. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Now, just one question. Now, last week you told us that San Jose was about to go up in flames. What is the situation?
Well, some good news. Still a bit of smoke in the air, but there's, 111 different fires in California. 34 of them are in Northern California. And the biggest ones to us are somewhere between 41 and 78% contained, especially to my lovely Santa Cruz and Half Moon Bay area all along the coast. There were terrible fires in the big redwoods. There's a park that many people know about called Big Basin, where I used to go fish for tiny little wily trout. And they have redwood trees that are over 1,000 years old. And I'd been told that several of them had been burnt beyond, they had died. And apparently they all did, most of them did well. So, but a lot of people lost homes. And it's still pretty scary because it's so dry out here right now. But thank you for asking. I'm able to resume my walking. I had a few days where apparently the air in San Jose was worse than the air in Shanghai.
Wow.
Which, think about that. And that came from one of my buddies, Jeff Shaver, who was in Shanghai in 2010 when it had a air quality rating of 400. And London normally is in the 60s. And San Jose is about the same. San Jose during these fires was up to 200. And I could feel it, and you just don't take chances. So, yeah, we're doing much better. Did you get to play golf today?
I should have done, but it was raining.
Oh, too bad. Now, what is the weather really like during the summer over there? Is it like Wisconsin, where one day you have a big thunderstorm and the next day it's glorious?
No, it's been warmer than usual, but just in the last week or two we've had quite a lot of rain. But then those of us who have gardens feel the need for rain.
Sure.
Right.
I'd started my garden in Wisconsin, and the neighbors are helping right now. But by the time I get back, anything that I attempted to grow will probably be, in remission. So we'll have to see. But we've got a few topics today,
yes.
And let's start with one of the fun finds of the last couple of years, Gemma Ricci. She has had, again, just a wonderful season. She's building her skill set. What do you think about her?
I think she's amazing, really. I mean, she came third in the Millrose, and she came third in Trieste in an 800, and she's won every other race she's been in this year.
Wow.
She's won 800s and 400s. She's gone under 2 minutes for the 800, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, including a 1:57.91. She's done just half a second over 4 minutes for the 1500. And it's interesting that now Coach Andy is tending to put them in different races. Like tomorrow, they're in Marseille in France with Gemma going in the 15 and Laura in the 800.
Wow.
I think there's no doubt that the 1500 is Laura's faster best race. But which is Gemma's is an interesting one. I asked Andy that question. I said but I phrased it badly. I said to him, "Do you know what their best distance is?" And he said, "Yes, I do."
And he didn't answer it, did he?
He didn't answer it. He said, they may not agree with me, but I think I know.
Well, we'll have to leave it. Well, that'll be another question we'll have with him. Let's go to Andy. You've spent a little time with him. You've got a piece, 4-part piece coming up with us over the next couple of weeks, and I'll start to get posting it tomorrow. What's your take on Andy Young?
Well, I've just really got to know him a bit in the last year. I mean, he's a very, very British coach because, I mean, in the piece I talk about him coaching at Glasgow University, but that is totally, totally different from being a salaried coach at an American college.
Okay.
This would have been as a volunteer coach while having another job.
Okay, all right. So that's like when I was in uni, my cross-country and track coach was an engineering professor. And he did it because he liked it, and he developed a program, and it built into that. Now, in the British system, are there scholarships in college for running or not?
No.
Okay.
We don't have any sports scholarships at all.
Wow.
And I mean, George Gandhi, who was a legend at Loughborough, is probably towards not the only one, but there are very few who actually make a living out of it. Hannah England's husband, Luke Gunn, is in that role at Birmingham. But you're almost a kind of, what do you call them, AD?
Sure, athletic director. Yeah.
As well.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But you mean Andy started coaching when he finished running, and then he got somebody who ran for Scotland. That was his first elite. And then, I mean, somebody told him that there was this girl called Laura Muir who was coming to study veterinary science at Glasgow and would be there for 5 years, and she was a decent club runner. Would he have a look at her? And I mean, Andy says when I first saw Laura, she wasn't the most talented athlete I'd ever seen, but quite soon I could see that there was a fire within her. And that, that when she was running with boys, she would be chasing them down. And when she chased the first one down, she'd be after the second one. But, in a way, she had come to university to study veterinary science to become a vet.
Sure.
But just gradually she started getting better and started running internationally, and now graduated last year as a vet. I did actually once tease her, asking her if she had any friends who didn't have a dog, and she said not many. So she's a very animal-loving girl, and she's suddenly Jamariki comes along, and I mean Andy would say that at the age of 17, Gemma had achieved more than Laura had at that age.
Sure,
but they seem to be best friends as well as everything else. Sometimes I wonder. I mean, I've asked this question of Raven Rogers. Do you and Ajay, when you were in the training group together, do you actually get on all right when you actually know you're going to be running against each other? And certainly the situation with Gemma Riki and Laura Muir is that they are best friends. I mean, actually, once Laura tweeted that they had just come back from a month's training camp, and the next day they had to meet for a coffee because they were missing each other.
You mentioned something, and I want to go back to it. You talked that Andy, when he met Laura, he wasn't, I'm paraphrasing you, he was rather nonplussed with what he saw, but he realized very quickly that there was this fire there. And then you've got Gemma, who is this incredibly talented young woman. So let's do that whole B.F. Skinner nature or nurture thing. Do you think that Laura, it's an interesting skill set that Andy has because he's nurturing both of them. and he has one that perhaps may have a bit more natural ability,
Mm-hmm.
and he's also corralling the competitiveness.
Mm-hmm. I think that what he was saying about Laura was that she had decided to go to university to study for 5 years to become a vet and to spend her life as a vet.
Yeah.
She thought she quite enjoyed running, and within the local context, she was quite good at it. So she thought she'd do a bit of running, but she had no thought of becoming a professional athlete.
Wow.
Whereas and of course, at that stage, Andy probably wasn't an elite coach because he may have had one, but that was really about it. But it was just when Laura started becoming world class and getting sponsored that suddenly he could make a living out of it.
Well, I heard a story several times, and I was privy to a couple conversations, that when Laura started doing well, it started to become like what happens in the U.S. sometimes. That sponsors and the federation get involved and say, you need a better class of coach. And while I don't think Andy would talk about it, I think Neil Black supported him. But there was people trying to push that stuff around. And that's always a challenge. I remember when Farah changed coaches, Paula's husband.
Yes.
And I've known Paula's husband. Well, we've hung out at a few track meets, for hours, and you get to know somebody when you can geek out with them. Really liked him.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I saw him with Mo was at that the Chicago Marathon where he won that year, and he watching coach an athlete, and I wrote a note that day that all the pressure was on the new coach, and that if Mo won, he wouldn't get much credit for it. But if Mo did not win, he would get blamed for it. And it's also that nature of coaches sometimes. It's both art and science, as you and I've talked about. But I've always been impressed with Andy. He seems no BS. He seems like a real human being, and that's great.
Yeah. Now, going back to what you said about nurture or nature, you see, Andy in the piece said to me that if you coach 30 kids in a class, you can make them all better, but you can't make 30 Olympians.
Yes.
But then he added, but I wonder how many of them could become Olympians if they had the willpower and the determination and were prepared to work their butt off.
Yeah. No, I think that's that's one of those lessons that life lessons. I still think that most of the reason why I stuck with things was because what I learned in athletics and the role models I had as coaches. And I think Andy's right about that. We've got the British Championships coming up in a couple days, and we've got Brussels coming up. We'll get to Lausanne too, but I just wanted to. You mentioned just before we went on air that I'm being attacked by a killer fly out here. I wish one of the hummingbirds or one of my bat friends would attack it, but the bats are sleeping right now. So what do you? Some of the fine athletes in the UK are showing up, and some are not.
Well, of course, this is the British Championship and selection trials. Those who come in the first two are automatically selected for. Well, there's nothing to be selected for, so therefore, there's if it's an Olympic year, you have to do the trials or you don't make the team.
Sure.
But so tomorrow night in Marseille in France, we have Laura Muir, Shalena Oskin-Clark, and Adele Tracy in an 800. Then in a 1500, there's Gemma Reekie against Eilish McColgan. In the men's 800, you've got Giles, Learmont, and Langford.
Sure.
So there is 1, 2, 3, 6, 8 elite athletes who will not be at the trials. And, somebody tweeted tonight, isn't this a great shame and an opportunity to showcase British athletics being missed? But let's be honest about it. Those 8 athletes are all being paid to run in France.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be paid to run in the trials. And this has been a difficult year for athletes. I mean, we've heard that Nike have cut the funding to some British athletes by 50%. And those who make a living out of running in diamond leagues have found there have been no diamond leagues. So if people are getting a chance to be paid and frankly have a more competitive race than they'll get in the British Championship, I totally understand that.
Sure. What is the British media saying about it? Are they chastising the athletes?
Well, sadly, the British media says very little because there's so little coverage of it. But on social media, there has been some criticism. But I mean, I understand that. I understand the situation.
Now, we also have on Friday, Brussels, the Ivo van Damme meeting, which has always been a fantastic end of the season meet. You and I love that event.
Indeed.
Neither one of us will be there. And this year it's rather, it's a rather more intimate event.
Yes. And also, I mean, those of us who were at Brussels last year and remember Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price running against Dina Asher-Smith for the 100-meter title. Well, this year, in the 100-meter race, there's only one athlete who's ever gone under 11 seconds.
Wow.
In the 100 meters hurdles, where last year the winner was Danielle Williams beating Kenny Harrison, and the previous year the winner was Brianna Rollins. But again, this year, 6 of the 8 athletes have never gone under 13, and one of the things about the Diamond Leagues at the moment, I mean, Brussels have done well to get an event on. Let's give them credit, just as Monaco and Stockholm did. But there are virtually no American athletes there, and there are virtually no Jamaican athletes there. So if you're talking about the sprints, which would traditionally be US against Jamaica, none of those athletes are there.
Yeah.
And I mean, Shelley-Ann said to me earlier this year that she's just not comfortable traveling at the moment with all that's going on in the world. And totally understandable. And I mean, Shelley-Ann has nothing to prove to anyone.
Sure. A question. You'd mentioned that last year Dina Asher-Smith competed there, and we know that Dina was quoted as saying this year that she was not going to be competing at all. And then she did a little race in her club.
Yeah.
Is she doing anything else? Is she going to be at the British Championship?
She will not be at the British Championship.
Because I've heard from a couple sources that the sponsors are not real happy with people like at that American meet where some knuckleheads did 4 or 6 events. Now, I think that they really believed that they just needed to compete 12 times during the season. And in talking to a couple of the sponsors, they made it quite clear that while they understand this is a rarefied year, the athletes need to compete. And when they compete, it means putting in a good effort. So I'm just curious if these kind of things have come up. And I think it's, we have this one layer of support really across the sport. The majority of the support comes from the footwear companies. And some of the creative meet directors have been able to find key businesses within their local communities that have an experience with athletics and that's why they're involved. I remember the old M&M Mars company in the 90s was a global sponsor of athletics and of FIFA Your Football. And I was able to get a sponsorship with them for our magazines. And the reason being, I found out, was the Mars, the brothers who owned the company, one of their grandkids was running track and one of their grandkids was doing soccer. And when both the kids graduated and stopped doing the sports, their sponsorship stopped. I mean, I'm glad that they were able to support things for a while, but that's the nature of our sport, unfortunately, right now.
I mean, I think it's a great shame that the British Championships clash with Brussels. But, of course, there's a story behind that, because the British Championships were supposed to be at the end of June, and COVID made that impossible.
Yeah.
Then they rescheduled them for early August. And again, that wasn't possible. And I mean, Joe Coates, on the briefing that I was on with her, was asked about that, and she said, well, we needed to have BBC television, and television has got certain slots available on certain weekends, and they could do the event on the first weekend in September, but they couldn't do it the second because there was something else was happening. It couldn't get airtime. So therefore, they had to go for this, even though it was clashing with Brussels. And because there's no selection there's no event for which people are trying to be selected. Therefore, there's no obligation on athletes to be in the national championship if they choose not to. And I think it's just a one-off. And of course, it is a shame and it is a lost opportunity. But I don't feel that I blame any athlete for missing it. Because, I mean, if you take Gemma Reekie and Laura Muir, with no disrespect to anyone else, they're going to win their events in the British Championship. And perhaps they feel that a more competitive race internationally is what they need at this stage. And I mean, the fact that Laura has been running quite a few 800s, which she certainly, I wouldn't expect her to be running in the Olympics. That's just part of her preparation at the moment.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You were able to watch Lausanne earlier today.
Yes.
In the lovely United States. We haven't seen it yet. We may get to see it tonight. Tell us about that competition and what impressed you there. Well,
the quality of the women's was nothing like the quality of the men's. But the winner of the women's was Angelika Benson at 4:72.
Okay.
Holly Bradshaw looked great, but then just couldn't get over 4:72.
Okay.
But I mean, the shootout between Mondo and Sam was everything you could have hoped for. I mean, there was Braz and Le Villeneuve. They both went out at 5:72.
Okay.
Le Villeneuve, of course, had broken his thumb and was just coming back and so on.
Sure.
So, but I mean, the fascinating thing for me was the way Sam and Mondo approached it, because Mondo did very little jumping. Sam came in early and did every height. So when we got to 5:82, this was the second jump by Mondo and the seventh by Sam, because Sam had done every one all the way along. But then there were two of them, and they were successful at 5:82, 5:87, 5:92, 5:97. Both of them over 6 meters.
Wow.
It's funny. You could imagine Sam going home and somebody saying to him, "How do you get on tonight?" And says, "Oh, terrible! I jumped 6:02 and I lost."
And that's what happened.
Yeah, so he did 6:02 and Mondo did 6:07. Mondo tried 6:15, and as somebody said, the Swiss had organized the entire meet brilliantly, except they hadn't expected it to go on so long, and the light was failing. And Mondo had one attempt at 6:15, and then just said, "Look, I can't see." And Mondo did so well that we're giving him tomorrow off.
Okay.
And then he's competing again on Friday.
Where's he at on Friday? Brussels?
Brussels, yes.
Okay. Is Sam competing there too?
No.
Okay. And then Piotr is got a hamstring issue, I heard.
Yeah, he wasn't there.
Okay. Is Renault competing, do you know?
I think he's not in Brussels.
Okay. No, I just posted some lovely pictures that you took of Renault, and I'll get the Mondo stuff up shortly. And the shots from Sam were tremendous. It's such a great group, and I was reading the interview notes from yesterday, and we'll get those posted with some video today. There was a time about 8 years ago when the men's pole vault was so overpowered by the women's pole vault that it was just another event. And I think you had Renault, and you had Sam and Piotr. Now you have Mondo, and you have Thiago Braz. There's a group of about 12, but there's really a core of 4 or 5 men that are. They get along well and they compete well. You know that Mondo competes in breathing. He does, he doesn't let anything go. And
go on. Sorry.
And Sam focuses competition on the pole vault, which is interesting. That you talked about the dearth of jumps that our friend Mondo had, 2 to 7. The thing that Sam would tell you is that he's doing 2 things there. 1, he's building his body up, and 2, he's also preparing for a countback and being able to win. They both play chess, but they do it at 160 miles an hour, And it's one of the events, up there with watching Kovacs and Krauser and Thomas Walsh in the shot. There's these. It's like you and I talk about a lot about the middle distances and the sprints, and the thing about there's some field events out there. Like I've never gotten over watching Pedro Pichardo bump Christian Taylor before he jumped in Lausanne one time, and it so irritated Christian that he went and popped in 1806. I mean, and he said afterwards, he goes, "Yeah, man, my blood was boiling." And Christian's just like this lovely, really mellow guy, but there's those windows, and that's what we like to see in athletics, and it keeps it fun to write about.
But what was fascinating tonight was that when Sam did his 6:02, before Mondo jumped, he came over and congratulated Sam on the 6:02.
That's cool.
And I mean, you wouldn't get that in many sports at that point in the middle of a competition. And then you saw after Mondo got the 6:02, he and Sam embraced. I'm not quite sure where the social distancing was, but anyway, we'll leave that for another occasion. And then Pavel came up and embraced both of them. So I mean, it's while people who are losing are clearly feeling it, the graciousness of that group and the care for each other is quite remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's part of those lovely lessons. I think that young people can learn from athletics, and so can the fans. It keeps it kind of interesting. You were mentioning, Stuart, about you had some concerns about the quality of the fields in Brussels.
Yeah, let me just, before I say that, something I had never seen happen until tonight was I think, yeah, it was Cole. What I think it was Cole Walsh was getting ready to vault,
Sure.
and he put his pole, just put it on the ground, and it snapped.
Oh my God!
But as the commentator said, well, he'd be pretty thankful it snapped there, rather than when he was in midair.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because of the point I made about Brussels, compared to the quality because Brussels is normally a final. I think there are an awful lot of athletes competing in Brussels on Friday night, who wouldn't get close to Brussels in a normal year.
Yeah.
Now, it's nobody's fault, but it's just the nature of the year. As I said, that last year we had the shootout between Dina and Shelley Ann, whereas this year only one of the women in the 100 meters has ever gone under 11.
Yeah.
Because none of the Americans are there, none of the Jamaicans are there.
Yeah.
I know the Australian high jumper Nicola McDermott, who was in Sweden and who is now she's in Brussels, and then she's going on to Rome. But she has got to be careful planning her way around Europe, and was advised by the Australian government not to come to Britain.
Wow.
Because if she had come to Britain other than to compete, and there was nothing for her to compete, she would have been forced to quarantine.
Yeah.
And so there are a few athletes like Raven Rogers, who has been doing a tour around Europe, but I totally understand. Golly, somebody calling into complain already.
Yeah, I tell you, I can't believe that they're that quick about complaining about us, but Stuart, sometimes they do. I think that, I think you're right, because just think about how many times we've gone, wow, is that athlete going to make it to Brussels? And it's really, that meet has really been able to bring the quality of the event up by that whole end of the season thing, and it's shown some of the promise of the Diamond League, and again, you and I've said it a couple times, but Monaco showed us how meets should be done during the pandemic, but also Monaco showed us how wonderful that meet is, and Jeff Hartwig, the American athlete, who's gone over 6 meters, but 603 outdoors, 602 indoors. He said that you had to show respect for the meet management at Lausanne, and I love that meet. It's one of those meets where we get to see almost all of our friends from the IAAF, because they have a short trip, and the quality of the stadium is good. And I just remember watching Muriel Skena at one end of the meet and Sam and Mondo at the other.
Yeah.
And it was like, my gosh, what, you were trying to watch both at the same time. And it was so exciting. And that's the kind of meet we want to take people to who have never seen a track meet, And that's the thing that keeps it fun. Let's see, we're down to about 4 minutes. I want to give you a little time to talk about anything that you feel is on your mind that we haven't covered in a while.
Well, just to say, first of all, I don't want to be too hard on Brussels, because you've got Mo Farah in his 1 hour race. You've got Jakob Ingebrigtsen. You've got Faith Kipyegon, who won the 1,000 meters in Monaco, doing it again.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And incidentally, it's just been announced today that Mo Farah is going to do a half marathon in Northern Ireland on something like the 12th of September as a kind of preparation. Well, preparation for the London Marathon, which he's apparently being a pacemaker.
Yeah, I don't understand that one. Is his training not gone well, or did he just decide that
there were always rumors that he actually he was going to do track in the Olympics this year.
Yeah, that's what we'd heard.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not close to him, so it's just at the level of rumors.
We'll have to send a note to Gary Loff and see if he will respond to us. Maybe because we don't give him too much crap. He might send us a note.
Yeah.
But I just what's fascinating to me is watching when the British media is really primed, how upset they can make athletes and coaches. It's like over here, the American baseball and American football press. Oh my gosh, they're just, and I know it's almost 24-hour soccer or football over there.
Yeah.
It's 24-hour American football over here, and the season's just like, well, is it going to happen?
I think part of the problem, I would say, is that, I mean, I remember in about 2013 going to the Rome Diamond League, and there were 5 British athletics writers at that. And all of them were pretty much full-time on athletics and possibly some other Olympic sports. Wow. Now, none of those newspapers has somebody who is a full-time track and field writer. I mean, like Rick Broadbent would have been one of them. And, Rick still does track and field, but he also does golf.
Yeah.
He does boxing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I understand this because people don't buy newspapers the way they used to. And so, but I think the part of the issue is that the person who is doing 3 or 4 different sports doesn't build up the expertise. He doesn't build up the relationships with athletes. And I mean, I actually had a conversation with somebody who writes for the Times, and which I had suggested to him that I was frustrated that the Times seemed to be more interested in doing governance pieces and negative pieces rather than saying, rather than writing about Gemma Reekie and Laura Muir's exploits.
Sure.
And that may be what the editor wants. It may be that the writers are doing 6 different sports and I really just don't get a handle on it. I mean, sometimes the Times doesn't even report. I mean, in Monaco, I don't believe there was anything in the Times about the Monaco Diamond League.
Well, we will have to cut it off there, my friend. We're down to about 30 seconds. I'm going to thank you and wish you a wonderful staycation.
Thank you.
We will chat with you again about the 13th or 14th. Good. This is Larry Eder with Stuart Weir. Stuart is in Oxford, England, the intellectual capital of the world. And so long. Hey, sports fans, it's Larry Eder with RunBlogRun. This is Epilogue. Yeah, Larry needs some extra words. For Athletics Chat 17, Stuart and I recorded this on September 2nd because Stuart's going on a staycation, which means, like many Brits, he's not one of the 30 million leaving the British Isles to go on vacation. That's because there's a 14-day quarantine in France, in the UK, there's a 14-day quarantine in the Czech Republic, 14-day quarantine in Switzerland, and there's a 14-day quarantine from the US. So it's making it really, really exciting. Okay, so today we covered Gemma Reekie, very talented athlete, who did quite well in her young years. She's a few years younger than Laura Muir. Conversation, our friend Stuart Weir from Oxford, England, the intellectual capital of the world, did mention that when Andy Young, the coach of both Gemma and Laura, first started coaching Laura, he was kind of nonplussed, but what he was taken back by is her drive. And he made a comment to Stuart one time, Andy Young did, that if you have a group of 30 athletes, you can probably make all 30 better, but you're not going to make all 30 Olympians. And then he said, but if you had the time and they had the drive, how many of them could be Olympians? think that's interesting. I think there's their whole nature versus nurture thing. I think in the U.S., we have relied on a lot of natural talent. The problem is I've seen really talented people who have no drive, and I've seen really untalented people who have a lot of drive. And I'm not sure what is better, to have a bit of talent and to work your butt off. I think that this sport's all about, wherever you're at, physically talented or not, tall, short, skinny, maybe a little overweight, there's a place for you in the sport. And what you put into it is what you get out of it. That's the way it's always been. And I think that really that's the way it always will be. Coaching is both art and science. What I mean by that is you better know the technological things, the technique of the sport. You need to know about nutrition. You need to know about physiology. You need some horse sense on how to recover athletes. But most of all, you need to be able to get the athlete to believe in your system, because there's a lot of ways to do it. Some are harder than others. Some are easier than others. It's part of what makes the sport so much fun. And I think that it's one of the things that we as media sometimes fail to cover. Anybody can write about results, but results isn't what turns us on. It's about what happens in the competition. Today was the Lausanne Diamond League Athletissima. They focused on a pole vault this time. Angelika Bengtsson of Sweden won the women's in 472. She battled Holly Bradshaw. Holly looked pretty good. Just couldn't get over 472. Then the men's took off. You had Renaud Villeneuve, former world record holder. You had indoor record holder. You have Thiago Braz, 2016 Olympic gold medalist from Brazil. You had Mondo Duplantis, and you had Sam Kendricks. And Sam and Mondo duked it out. They cleared 582, they cleared 587, they cleared 592, they cleared 597. They both cleared 602. And then Mondo cleared 607. And he made one attempt at 615. The problem was our friends at Lausanne didn't think the meet was going to go on that long and weren't prepared for it. And the lighting was difficult. And Mondo, quite maturely, said, hey, you know what? I can't see anymore. Reminded me of the story about Bob Mathias in the 1948 Olympics in London, where they had to bring pickup trucks and on a little incline to show the pole vault bar so Bob could figure out at 18 where the bar was. I think it was only his fourth decathlon. He went on to win the gold medal. So sometimes it's primitive, sometimes it's not. This weekend is the Ivo van Damme meeting. Ivo van Damme was a brilliant Belgian athlete, won silvers in 1976 in both the 800 and 1500. He was a bear of a man, tall, powerful, died in an auto accident in December of 1976. And I'm not sure that there's been athletes with his charisma in Belgium in a long time. But the meeting, which is to celebrate Ivo van Damme, has had some great performances and continues to. And this year, we'll have some good events. I'll have some okay events too, but the 1 hour run, the women's 1 hour run, the men's 1 hour run, good 1,000 meters, good 1,500 meters. It should be a lot of fun to watch. And hats off to meet directors who are putting a meet on in this pandemic time, because it's quite difficult. Just a quick aside, thank you for all your thoughts and comments on the photo gallery we put up from the Sunset Tour from August and 29th. Some great pictures from Jesse Williams. We'll have pictures up at the Drake Blue Oval showcase by MediaCom this weekend. So there'll be some other great photos. Thanks, Ty Patton and Blake Bolden from them. Let's get back to the Brussels meeting. Besides Brussels, there's a meet tomorrow night, Thursday night in Marseille, and you've got 8 Brits running that one. You've got Laura Muir, you've got Jemarique, you've got Oksana Clark. I'm going to miss her hyphened name, and I apologize on that. You've got 3 British guys in the 800 as well, and they're going to miss the British Championships this weekend. British Championships are a lot of, it's supposed to be a selection for a championship event, except there's no championships. So how do you get athletes to be there? You're not paying money, and these guys are starving right now. The luckiest ones who have been continuing to compete still keep their sponsorship going, but some of them have had to juggle a lot. And that's the nature of this beast. So I think that where we should go is that British Championships, they'll have some fun performances. Brussels will be interesting. BBC's not going to cover Brussels live because it would compete with the British Championships, so you guys will have to watch it on YouTube like I do. We've got London coming up. I just saw the press release from London, and they're only allowing 12 media people there. So that's going to be most interesting. I'm going to try to reach out on that one and see what's going on. And then there'll be the Prague half marathon that I've got to post a piece on today too. But we'll have coverage from Lausanne today. This is September 2nd. We will speak to our friend Stuart on September 13th, I believe, 13th or 14th. He's going to be away for 7 days at a bit of a vacation. We'll have more content for you, and we'll try to get something from the UK to say some thoughtful things with the British accent. But this is Larry Eder, Epilogue 17, the Athletics Chat. Thank you very much for supporting this programming. And if you want to help us, if you can buy an ad, buy an ad. But if you can't, even if you can, subscribe to our Facebook page, subscribe to our Twitter page, subscribe to RunBlogRun. We'll send you a nightly newsletter. Okay, have a great day. Thank you to Stuart Ware for his help. Thank you to Mike Deering for putting up with me and trying to keep me awake. Larry Eder signing off. Take care.